Namaste and in catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please subscribe, like, share, make a comment or two. It is valuable to have your input because this is for you. Now, I'd also like to invite you to visit planetarycitizens.net, which is a nonprofit we've formed, and you can download a free copy of Planetary Citizens, Awakening the Heart of Humanity. And it's a great book. Jeff Mishlev calls it the best version of globalization he's ever read. So if that gives you any kind of indication, you'll find out more here soon. Now, this week's guest is Steven Puri. He is an awesome gentleman. He has been involved in the film and movie industry. He was vice president of production at 20th Century Fox. He was the executive vice president at Kurtzman Orkey, which is part of DreamWorks
Hmm.
Studios. He is now founder and CEO of the Sukha company, which is a
Hmm.
very blissful experience.
There you go.
And he helps remote workers focus, finish faster, and feel healthier. And as the founder of the Sukha company, he has got an amazing repertoire of skill set and opportunities. And we're going to find out more because he also has a rich inner life that I'm guessing he probably hasn't had a chance to talk about a whole lot. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Stephen, it is just so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope this is one of the more engaging and informative and touching episodes.
Well,
So we'll
with
do
your
the best we
background
can.
and the circuitous tangentialism of it, I'm sure that it's
True.
going to be really interesting. Now, speaking of interesting, the
Hmm.
reason we have these is to open up the door to discussing things that most of us are bereft of, and that's the inner experience we have because we're generally felt being weird, crazy, insane. We
Hmm.
get stiff arm from friends, from family, and we wonder, hey, do I really want to fit in, or am I okay with who I am because I trust my experience more than I do others trying to tell me what and how to do things, right? So,
True.
in that regard, when you were younger, because we like to start, when we first have those experiences that aren't stifled in any way, and sometimes we can remember those as kids, sometimes not. I'm
Hmm.
guessing that you had one that is coming to mind right now, and I'd love to hear about it.
Well, I'll say I remember, and this probably set me on a certain trajectory in my life. I grew up in Northern Virginia. My parents were both engineers.
Hmm.
My dad is from India. My mother is by descent French English, but born in New York.
Okay.
And I remember reaching a point in school where there really wasn't much for me to do. I had kind of worked my way diligently through things. So, as the universe is funny about that stuff, I got an offer from USC to leave high school early and go to college. And they said, we see what it is you've been working on and all that. We think we have a good set of opportunities for you. So the University of Southern California was like, do you want to try this? And that,
Virginia,
to
Southern
Cali.
California.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
in Virginia, there were not the same opportunities. Like I kind of reached a point where I was like kind of bored, like, why am I here? And, what
Well,
is this?
correct me if I'm wrong, but East
Hmm?
Coast is generally more left brain, right? They're
I,
really,
I guess
um,
so. Yeah, you could say that.
I
Yeah.
know that's an odd way of saying it.
Yeah.
However, they're more analytical. There's not as much
Mhm.
freedom of thought.
True. I mean, Los Angeles is definitely a place of, expansive kind of thinking and out of
Right.
box thinking. Yeah. So same with SF. That's yeah, I could see that point. Yeah.
Just
What's
a, observation from looking, right?
yes, and
You
thinking.
never know what you're gonna find until you just look without trying to see.
Yeah. Well, that I hear you, and yes, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. I could see that how things kind of pattern that
We
way.
had our first apocalyptic moment.
There you go. See that? And it's early in the pod.
Yeah.
What's in store? I don't know.
Yeah, this is gonna be wild.
So where would you like to go from here? What?
So you're on your way to California and you had this wonderful and I'm kind of envious because I was a brainiac in school, but I was in a
Hmm?
small rural community in central Indiana that
Oh wow.
nobody knew how to really support me in
Yep,
that.
I gotcha. Yeah, I was lucky in that they had they sort of came from me. They were like, hey, do you want to do this? So I went to college early and it was fun. I happily was not small. Like I was already like 5'10", 5'11". So
Wow. Okay.
I didn't really look as young as I was. Um
Size
and
matters.
size matters, that's the thing is like happily I was kind of shaving. So at that height with a little shaving, it wasn't I could tell people if I chose to how young I was, but
Right.
I wasn't really forced into like who's the kid in the class, sort of thing.
Well, with that kind of intelligence and acumen, you would tend, I would think, to have a little more mature approach as well and not seem younger.
a bit. I'd also done a TV show in DC, this news show. There was
Hmm.
a on Channel 5, essentially the Fox Metro Media Station. There was a show where the sort of shtick of the show was it was a 30-minute live news show, but it was for teens. It was
Okay.
specifically cute. And we were the top rated youth show in the DC Baltimore market. So it was fun in that regard, doing that for like 70, 69, 70 weeks to get to engage with a lot of people. Because remember, this is before Instagram, right? This is before
Right.
like TikTok and YouTube streaming and stuff. So people in DC who wanted to reach the youth market, they would come on our show. So we had the mayor on, we had on sports figures, people like that, because that was a great outlet. That was the number one outlet for them. So you got to interact with
Sure. And
really
they were
interesting
the
people.
kind of icons and um, heroes, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
that the kids need to know about.
Yeah. And it was great. It was a great, and I'm sure that is part of how USC heard of me, you
Sure.
know?
Right. Well, and
So
the fact that you're dealing with that level of mature adult
mhm,
would have risen your
affected
level
me.
of maturity. Yeah, amazingly so.
Yeah.
Probably unaware as it was happening, but afterwards you look back and go, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah. It's true. You're spot on. So that was a big transition for me from like that. I feel like I've outgrown this. I don't know what I'm doing here, sort of
Sure.
thing
Now, what
to
was going on inside? This is where, you have this opportunity, you've got these thoughts and feelings,
mhm.
and what were did you have another side of things that were seemingly synchronistic, breadcrumbs, serendipitous, um, moments of salience, if you will, um, that came along with that?
Well, I tell you this is interesting to think back. How did I feel? Was I feeling then? Um, I definitely felt a need for freedom, and moving several thousand miles away from
Hmm.
my parents was a big statement of like, hey, I just want to do what I want to do. And
Right. And it also indicated you had a certain fearlessness of the unknown.
hmm, Yeah, I think I'm definitely I'm okay with risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that risk, what did you feel was the major hurdle that you had in doing that? Was it emotional? Was it intellectual? Were there any spiritual indications of it as well? By spiritual, I mean that depth of interconnectedness that where you saw how those dots of your life were being connected and the flow was being created. You mentioned flow state earlier.
Yeah. No, I mean, I talk a lot on flow states now, but thinking back to that period of time, like, I think, I think the idea of going to LA and being part of this was awesome and exciting, right?
Hmm.
And I had a lot of friends that were going to New England schools. So I remember when I got this offer, I drove up with my mom to Yale and showed them and said, listen, this school in LA is inviting me to come early to college. I have a bunch of friends that have come here. Most of my friends were older than I was. So I had a bunch of friends that have come here. Would you consider this? I mean, my, know, achievements were pretty decent at that point
Right.
in time. And the admissions people at Yale said, this all sounds really great, but we've had really bad luck with students as young as you are coming to college. It's often emotionally very stunting, sort of hard thing. And
Sure.
if you're really set on doing this, go to USC for a year and then contact us about transferring in your sophomore year if you really like college at your age. Right.
Hmm.
And I understand the trepidation because I was young. I was like, who knows if I just crack. And, I
That's always
accepted.
possible, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, you had a certain, it seems,
Mhm.
fortitude.
Yeah. And I think it was also pretty stubborn.
Well, that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of
Sides of
goes
the
along with
same
it, doesn't it?
coin. Yeah. So that sealed it for me. I was like, okay, cool. So Yale's like, spend a year there, go do this. And I thought, let's see how it goes at USC. I have this opportunity to go back to Yale and say, hey, how about now? Like I've done well in my freshman year. And after my freshman year at USC, I loved it. I was like, I'm not transferring. This is fantastic. And I'd gotten more into film, more
Hmm.
interested in that, which, Yale had more of a drama department. And I was not looking to do, theater. you
Right.
know?
Well, you're right in the middle of the industry
Yeah.
area there too, right?
USC is arguably the best cinema TV school in the world,
Hmm.
and I was not in the cinema TV school, but being there and a lot of friends in it, like it's that exposure to there are a lot of ways to engage around like
Oh
storytelling
yeah,
there. And I
absolutely.
loved
And
that.
now, do you feel like we're also rather assimilationists,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Completely.
Um,
Yeah. Oh.
eh, because we are what is around us, both internally and externally. We're the combination of that.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. The only thing I didn't assimilate is I remember some of my friends that were cinema TV students, they would go up to Griffith Park Observatory
Ah,
and drop acid and like hang out deep in the forest up there and try not to get
sure,
caught.
sure. Been there.
And I was so like, I'm not doing drugs with y'all. Like that, I was too straight laced to be like, yeah, I'm gonna drop acid.
Right.
So,
Well, do you miss that experience now?
oh, I've
Do you
had that
wish that
experience.
that might have
Yeah,
been?
I don't know that then that would have been the right thing for me. Um,
Well, Sting says you don't do anything till you're 40,
I was
right?
14.
Yeah,
Like,
so
yeah, like that's not a good age to be like, hey, want to do drugs? No.
yeah, well, I was curious at that age, and I did.
Yep.
um, because school, I was challenged. I was making straight A's, but it just wasn't enough.
Hmm.
And I was looking for something, and somebody suggested, and I'm like, okay, why not?
Yeah.
And I just happened to be with my parents that night at a basketball game,
Okay.
and had the opportunity. I was in a safe place, knew it, just had the opportunity
Your
to
parents at a
watch the surf.
basketball game. This is super interesting.
Right. Well, and probably super stupid too, right? When you think about it. And I went up, in between games that we had the reserve and varsity games, and I played basketball. I didn't at that point because I'd ran over the reserve basketball coach during football. We were doing
Yep.
uh, split the dummy drills, and he said, if I don't point in time, run over me. So I did. Um, that didn't bode well.
I can only
But
imagine.
I listen literally and often behave that way. Um, so the in between games, one of my best friends was on the reserve team, and his father was then the assistant chief of police. And I went
Oh
over and sat
wow.
down and talked with him.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I demonstrated that, okay, I can do this, right? I don't feel so whacked out or out of control. And
Hmm.
then I went back and I sat down and I let myself relax and went into a different state of consciousness. And so I learned early that it was manageable.
Oh, okay.
And so that was, yeah. Um, don't ask me how, why, well, my life eventually led to the reasons why. However, just that experience of being able to have a different perspective of sight, of sound, of touch, of
Hmm.
all of those things that are heightened
Yeah.
in that experience.
Yep.
Um, and yet there were many folks, I felt it was a sacred experience early on,
Hmm.
where the rest of my friends, it was a party drug to them.
Yeah.
And I didn't treat it that way.
Your intention has a lot to do with how you alter your consciousness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Agreed. Yep.
Now, from Griffith Park, which is great, and Greek theater is near there. We saw King Crimson
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
too long
that's
ago.
true. The Greek
Yeah.
is right there.
Um, so when you were going through that, what were the things that were going on inside of you that caused this sense of, not sure I really want to go there, whether you're not ready for it, whatever. What was going on as an alternative to your mindset while your friends were in this other realm?
Mm, I'd like to say it was that thoughtful a decision. I think it was rather, I did not know what that represented. Like I had not done any drugs. I'd not had, you know,
Mhm. Well,
I
at
think I'd had
14, I mean, come on,
yeah,
right?
exactly. I think I tried a beer once and that was
Okay.
unpleasant. I was like, this tastes terrible, right?
Yeah,
Which actually to this day, as an adult, I still think beer tastes terrible, right? My German friends don't
sure.
understand how
All
I
right.
couldn't love it. But I think it was more like I don't know what that's going to be, and I don't know why I would do that. Like it just seems like my success, a lot of the attention or the accolades that I was getting was through really applying myself in a very like directed way. Like, okay, we're going to be great at math. Okay, we're going to be on the newspaper. Oh, okay, we're going to do this TV show, things like that. It was not really like in the artistic, like let me go explore my psyche. Let me use mind expanding substances. Like I didn't know what they were, and there was no
Right.
internet. There was no way to access any knowledge other than your friends being like, "Hey, man, we're all going to do this LSD," and you're like, "No,
Well, Big Sur wasn't too far away.
When you are 14, you don't have a car. Big Sur is an infinite distance away. You might as well say Mars. Mars is not
Right, right,
far,
right, right,
Zen.
right. Yeah, so you really had, that limited place. What's
Yeah.
interesting though is that as you were exploring this really practical
Mhm.
side of, you know, process and details and almost a delirium in some cases, I'm sure. What did you find? Where did that lead you, or how did that lead you into the greater expansion of the movie and film industry and your interest in it and what you could do in it?
Yeah. Well, what was funny is, and this is true in my life, like there are a series of very lucky things that have been dropped in my lap, and I've coupled that with working hard to make something of that opportunity, right?
Sure.
So I want to
Now
be
let
very,
me pause you because this brings up I got to ask this question.
yeah, well,
Did you ever recognize the serendipitous synchronicities that those breadcrumbs were and how there was another part of you that was guiding you?
in the moment, Did I recognize it in the moment, or I
either in the
recognize it
moment
in
or
hindsight?
on reflecting back, both.
Yeah, right. Reflecting back, yes, I could see like, oh, okay, wow, that was, you know,
Yeah, they say hindsight's 2020, right?
yeah. But other things, living it forward, I don't remember thinking about it this way, but looking at it in hindsight, you do in retrospect go like, okay, this was a unique thing in life that happened to drop into my lap, which could have gone to the wayside. But at the time, I was like, oh, I could make something of this. And then you work hard to make something of it, and that
Right.
sort of thing. So I've had setbacks, I've had a lot of things, but some of it is just, let's admit, it's a blind
Sure.
luck.
Now, in the flow state that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
those seem, especially for the young people today, and even old
Mm-hmm.
people, because, many of us, we never really pause, reflect in the moment
Mm-hmm.
to recognize these dots, if you will, that are
Mm-hmm.
just placed in for the breadcrumbs, right? They're
Sure.
placed in front of us
Yep.
because they're so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just this impression that you get initially. And we're not trained to pay attention to those because those are generally the most important. That's where the inner and the outer worlds merge.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this, what did you find later on
Mm-hmm.
was relevant in being able to connect those dots, recognize them from your past, and be more cognizant of them in your present?
Well, I would like to present myself as someone that has this amazing ability in the present to have that kind of perspective. And I feel that that would be misrepresenting myself. I think rather what I do is I have an open mind towards the things that come toward me. I try to see the best version of them and then
Mhm.
understand what would be the steps between this and that version. And sometimes you arrive at that version, sometimes you don't. I mean,
Right,
there are
right.
many variables. But
Well, sometimes it's not the end goal is not the purpose. It's
right,
taking a step on the path
yes. But
that
hopefully you have a
allows you
vision
to
of where the
deviate
path
from the
goes. You're
norm,
not
right?
just blindly wandering in the woods, right?
Right,
I don't think I
right.
blindly wander in the woods very well. I think I have ideas of where we're going. And you're right, along the way, the journey is the magic. But I don't think I set out on a lot of journeys just being like, let us just perambulate, or
Sure. Well,
you know.
obviously you were paying attention.
Yeah.
And that's the key factor because wherever we put our attention, intention, and interaction,
Mm-hmm.
that's the energy flow that we create.
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to follow it because it's our own, we're like a tesseract, right? Where we're throwing that energy, that intention out in front of us. And then as we experience reality, it returns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fair. Fair way to look at it. Yeah.
There's all kinds of ways, right? I find
Yes,
that
there
one,
are.
yeah, I find that kind of unique and really appeals to the science geeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it's you toss the energy out and it returns. This is how life works. We give and we receive. And how did you find in the giving of yourself to those moments, what was reflected from it? And did you notice a level or yeah, I'll say level of openness that was different from time to time, right? Scalable, so to speak, depending on what was happening in front of you.
This is might be heretical, but I'm just going to say it, which is
We're all heretics, and when it comes to truth, right? Because it's our direct experience that is it.
this is how I would characterize that. The thing that I understand you saying, or what I believe you're saying, is foundationally you need to understand that film, the show business, this is not show art. This is not making indie films for $2 in your closet, right? This is the
Right.
business I was in of like, this is a commercial art form. It is one driven by fear, by virtue of the fact that it is very hard to model. It's very hard to predict, right? So
Hmm.
there are some businesses where it's like, hey man, we make winter coats. We know this many people buy them every winter. As long as we market it this way, like people buy winter coats, right? It's like next season will be like this, right? As opposed to like in film, you can have Spielberg and Tom Cruise go over there and make a movie for $200 million and it bombs. You can have kids out of college make some weird little indie horror film that makes $250 million, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like wildcatting for oil in the old days. We were like, I don't know, idiot got a gusher on his land, and we had all these like smart oil guys, and we're coming up with nothing, right? So it is hard to model. And every year, I'm telling you, when you work at the studio, every year, 2 years, oh my lord, you have somebody who comes in with statisticians and quants and all that saying, we have built a model. We can tell you exactly what projects to greenlight. You input in here, you stuff in this thing, the stars, you stuff in this thing, the genre, you stuff in this thing, the time of year, right? And we'll just output, it's going to make this amount of money. And they're all garbage. They all run them on historical data to show you how great they are. And they actually, on a forward looking,
Sure.
sort of
But
production model, are
that
terrible.
that brings up the old adage, there's liars, damn liars, and statisticians.
Yeah, there you go, which is very good. Yeah, very true. So I say this just as a preface to my answer, which is so going into the film business, it is driven by fear because no one really knows. There's not a lot of certainty in that. So you get a lot of bad behavior. When people operate from fear, they generally operate from their lowest self, let's say, right?
Absolutely.
So even
Well, that's the
guys
constricted energy, right? They're
completely,
protecting that.
even
You're
people
not
whom
going to
you'd
let
say,
anything in that place.
right. So people whom from the outside you would say, they're getting first dollar gross. They've made this many movies. Da, da, da. They should be so secure and so whatever. They are still plagued with insecurities. I mean, largely across the board, right?
Right.
So, what does that mean? What that means is you are navigating around people who are going to compromise what might be ethical standards, moral standards, things like that, because they're not operating from abundance. They're not saying like, "Oh, I feel, you know, I can act this way." They're rather, "I need
Or even
to."
just freedom, right?
Yeah,
Abundance
exactly
really
right.
doesn't matter. Just being
Yeah.
fearless,
So
right?
there
And
it is.
stepping in to
Yeah.
that and finding the flow state,
So
right?
it's very rare to find that.
Yeah.
Um, Now, one of the things I did learn is because I was very fortunate to work with some really great creative people who were ethical, who did have moral backbones, and
Hmm.
did want to honor their word and stuff like that. That you did see among them patterns of how they operated in that world. And we've said several times the term flow state. Um, your audience, like, do you think everyone knows what a flow state is, or should I take 30 seconds to explain it?
Oh, let's do 30 seconds just in case.
Okay,
Right.
fair
Never
enough.
assume.
Never assume. Okay, so this concept will just be important, I think, for
Sure.
those listening
Absolutely.
as they get what we're talking about. So there was a Hungarian American psychologist, this guy Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he had a thesis. He said, "Hey, you talk to high performers in various disciplines, athletes and artists and scientists and inventors. And what's curious is when they talk about the concentrated states where they do the thing they're famous for, that we all know them for,
Hmm.
they talk about those states in very similar ways, even though their disciplines are very different." He's like, "What's up with that?" So he
Yeah.
did the research, talked to all these people, interviewed, did what scientists do, and he wrote a book at the end of it called Flow. It is the seminal work. What two? Sorry.
Yeah. The evolving self was his first one.
Right, but I'm talking specifically about how we get flow
Oh, and the
state.
flow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
Um,
I'm with you. I love that you know
Psychology of
that.
optimal experience.
Exactly. There you go. That is the full title.
Yeah.
So, and you surely know this, is he said, what I thought was the greatest thing. He said, "I chose this word flow because it was the most beautiful metaphor for what I found, which
Hmm.
is we are all on the river paddling to move ourselves forward. But if you align your boat with the current, it carries you, it magnifies your efforts, and you go further and faster." And that is what these high performers have learned how to do, and
Right.
do it repeatably.
Well,
And
and you
it's a
have to.
fascinating concept of being able to be in this
Absolutely.
state of flow.
Absolutely. One thing that we miss oftentimes, you got to hit the pause button first, right? To be able to get yourself out of your own way.
Very true. If you want to expound upon that, he said, and let me acknowledge
Go ahead.
smart people have researched this. After he sort of planted the flag in this word flow and this concept of flow state, like you have really it's standing on the shoulders of giants sort of thing of like, the cows and the Nears and the Kotlers and all these people digging down going like, let me investigate part of this. But in very broad, reductive strokes, because I know this is a short podcast. So, he said, listen, this state seems to be characterized by the fact that you lose track of time. You're not staring at the clock. Distractions fall away. You're in your work. You're doing your best work. You're doing a compressed period of time. And at the end, you feel uplifted, not depleted.
Yeah. You feel
And
high. You feel
yeah,
like on fire with the
exactly.
energy,
Yeah.
I recognize it early. I'm a progressive jazz drummer.
Oh my God. Yeah. The work that's done with like improvisational jazz artists and fMRIs and stuff at the prefrontal
It's
cortex shutting
just
down. Yeah.
it's an amazing place to be in because,
Yeah.
and this is what um, Mihaly ascribes to it, right? It's like a jazz quartet
Yeah.
jamming, right? You
Exactly
lose
right.
ego, you lose time, you become one with the instrument, you have a conversation with others.
Yeah. So it is, depending on what you do, it is a beautiful thing to access. Now, he did say, listen, none of these high performers I spoke to get into flow states when they're doing stuff that they just don't believe is meaningful. Like you can't just get into a flow state stapling
Right?
papers or
It's not
whatever. Like,
forcible.
yeah, exactly. You need to believe what you're doing is meaningful. He's like, you have to have skills that apply. As much as we talk about like Michael Jordan being in the zone when he's playing basketball or Picasso being in the thrall of, he's like,
Right.
it's not Picasso throwing a basketball. There will be no flow there, right? It's not Michael Jordan trying to paint, right? Or play baseball.
Well, we'd have a
Um,
lopsided basketball at the frame, right?
they're right, exactly. Or maybe so, yeah. And he writes about this, but he said there are some conditions precedent that sort of help you get there. You have to be challenged at something you have skills at. You have to believe it's meaningful, things like that. And
Well, that steps
what?
into a state of love,
Hmm?
right?
Love of what you're doing, yeah.
Yeah, or just love in general,
Hmm.
right? Because the th the thing that I've learned, or at least believe that I've learned, is that there's two things that are our core desires in life, and that's loving and
And
being
chocolate.
loved.
Oh, sorry. Okay, right. Being loved, yes.
Yeah, right, because it's reciprocal, right? But you can't
Yeah.
get it until you love yourself, which means you got to get out of the ego and become we go,
Hmm.
and then find that flow state. Because in that, what I've found and what seems to be reflected from
Hmm.
everybody I've read is
Yeah.
there's no push or pull of energy. This is what Urban Laszlo gets into. Everything's energy, right?
Yeah.
Quantum physics. I made the mistake of saying, in quantum physics, it's been proven now that it's 99% space and 1% material. And he says, I would say it's 100% energy.
Right.
And, that just resonated so much in my entire being. There's no argument with that because we are energy
It's a very cool mind experiment to think of matter as simply energy at rest.
and or condensed into form. I mentioned earlier about
Hmm.
the understanding that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just
Hmm.
unaware. Well, when you think about the Vedas and their, and I don't know if you've got into those, but they state basically that we're all divine threads incarnate, capable or connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well,
Hmm.
what's that mean? It means we're able to live in harmony with creation, right? So how do
We
we
hope.
do that?
Yeah.
What's our individuated, perfected form, fit, and function, if you will,
Hmm.
in this reality that brings about that flow state? And for you, it was this path of going into the industry that everybody is affected by because your energy needed to be there in order for certain things to happen. Would you agree with that in your own experience? I mean,
At a very
I'm
high
not in your
level.
body, so I don't know that for
Yeah. At a
sure.
very high level, yes. And what you said
Yeah.
a few moments ago near the top of the pod about, the circular nature of like what you're giving out is what is going to return to you from the world. it's not quid pro quo as much as it is just like you're in the mass, the the swirling energy of the world. And yeah, what you're going to
Yeah.
get back is going to be something you put into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It
Yeah.
may take a while, like, that 28-year dream come true that I've
You
had
can't
for a
count
couple
on
years
it,
ago.
but yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
because
Don't
you
set your
never
clock by
know.
it. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Don't set your clock by it, but yes.
Oh no, what you have, it seems, let me ask you this question rather
Yeah.
than say it. Do you find that it's a matter of basically practicing the 5 Ps: patience, perseverance, persistence, passion, and purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Those five seem to kind of, it's like the 5 fingers, right? We have 5 relationships: body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos. There's all kinds of those natural things.
Right.
We begin to looking at our bodies and how our bodies reflect creation because we are it. We're just now able to go from the formless state of watching to the formed state of experiencing,
Yeah.
not realizing the kind of power we wield to create our own experience. That was like,
We ultimately are. And it's funny.
absolutely, and it's
There's
not
a
heretical. It
there's a
really isn't.
more glib way I express the same idea I think you're bringing up, which is, and this is of course born of the fact that I worked in film for a long time,
Sure.
which is we are all starring in a movie called ourselves, and I'm a supporting player in your movie, and you're a supporting player in mine.
Absolutely.
And the more you remember that, the easier it is to be a good supporting player. To be like, oh, okay, today I am in Zen's movie, and he is looking for me to be, a good podcast guest and to bring these ideas or these fun stories or these, sort of spiritual leanings to this. And, I'm looking at you and thinking, okay, so you're a supporting player in my movie. I'm looking for you to help me create something engaging and interesting and put something good back into the world. Like we were talking about before, we recorded this. So anyway,
Yes.
back to you in the studio.
Such, these circuitous conversations are just full of opportunities and reflections and abilities to connect at greater levels and for the audience to connect too, to see themselves in
Mm-hmm.
this, because often what we talk about has gone through the minds of others too. And their reflection, their understanding, their memory, the remembering, you mentioned that, it just so in a sense, what we are in the process of doing is remembering ourselves, right? Before we came here, we were all one, right? We were in this oneness, right? We still are, but we
Yep.
just think we're separate. So in that condensation into form, and Urban Laszlo talks about the higher self, right? We're all together. We're all this energy. We don't realize how interconnected we are because we think we're separate and we're afraid we're going to lose what we have
Mm-hmm.
or something else, right? And that causes the condensation of our own energy, which doesn't allow it to be in the flow state, right? Not even close.
Right.
Now, how did you find that capacity to be open and willing to step into things that at first presented themselves just as a potential and yet unknown, and yet that having a sense that, oh, wow, there could be something really powerful here. Did you notice those kinds of things?
It is I would say in the last 10 years that I've had more sense of how my energy and actions and thoughts affect the world around me.
Hmm.
I think through
I don't
my
think we got
20,
the maturation when we're younger to even think of those things.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So like to think out in my 20s and 30s was very focused on, building companies or, putting together projects, getting films made, that sort of thing. My career, gratefully is going very well. That was much more on my mind. Now, the thing that I think about a lot is what am I doing to actually affect the world in a way that will last? Like other people will have value whether or not I am here. And definitely, I mean, as you know, I'm a new father. That factors into my thinking, going like, okay, gotcha. So I've got a little rascal. We'll hopefully have a daughter in a year and a half.
Sure.
Um,
It brings
and
back the Moody's, right? To our children's children's children. Remember that album?
I think you beat me on that one. I don't know
Yeah.
that album. That reference I don't have.
Moody Blues.
Moody Blues. Yeah, no, I know Moody Blues, but I don't think I know the reference. Anyway, so I'm
Well, I do have a
pontificating.
few years on you.
Yeah, but that thought of, okay, what am I doing to help people be who they can be?
Yeah.
To get that out. That's why we created the Sukha company. To be blunt, like I wouldn't have done this in my 20s. No, like the idea of, hey, here are the tools to get into a flow state. Go do something. Like the greatness you have inside, don't die with it there.
Right.
That propels me now much greater than it would in my 20s, just flat out. So that I see as a much more attractive pursuit. And I love that I will explain to my children at some point what I did. Just glaze over a lot of the film stuff because
Sure.
did Die Hard 5 change the world? The Wolverine sequel, the Independence Day? No, they didn't really change the world, right? But the idea that, hey, for the people who have something inside them, I want to write the next great American novel, or open this restaurant thing, or create a tech company, or help all these people with a new model for micro lending in Africa, whatever it is. Like, what is the great
Right.
thing you have you're going to contribute? The idea that I could help them to get that out, through flow states, through the flow state app. I mean, that's what I'm going to tell my kids I did. The rest of it's kind of like, yeah, great. You want to
Sure.
watch it? We can watch Star Trek. It's funny. I'm in Star Trek. Let's have a good laugh. Okay, moving on.
No, it's and it's such a wonderful place to be able to reflect on that and see at least the potential of the contribution that you're attempting to make, and then having it manifest in front of you as you're bringing this team and
Let
these
us
energies
hope. I mean,
together.
in the best possible world, yes, yes.
Well, and apparently it's what's happening, right? And now, have you considered or gone to the place, and this may also be
Mhm.
relative to the maturation process, right? Where, it's that remembering process. Not only were we together separately before we came here, now we're together separately, but we've forgotten that we were all in harmony before coming here. Now,
Mm-hmm.
do we also, or have you also found that, when it comes to the physical body, what we know of it as, because we're constantly replenishing it, cells, as you mentioned before, cells die off and then they get replaced. Um, have you come to the understanding that we're actually of the earth completely because of the sustenance that we get from it? Whether we want to put the personality of Gaia or whatever, there's this
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, there's this nourishment that we get that comes from whether it's plants, animals,
Mm-hmm.
water, whatever, it's still all produced of the earth. They feed from
Yeah.
the earth. We
Yeah.
all feed from it. So there's this
Agreed.
energy, there's this consciousness of that, which is kind of where I went with planetary citizens, right? We've got to understand this, where Donald Keyes was at back in the 70s. He was Youthont's speechwriter. Youthont was the Secretary General for the UN. And so Planetary Citizens at that time was an organization that perceived the world as potentially borderless.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 70s, that wasn't happening. Right? Cold War and everything. So there was still this, and still today, it's not quite there, but we've recognized that we do have enough resources for everybody to be taken care of. It's just that they're mismanaged and the distribution systems aren't quite what they need to be. And there are still some others that, would rather hoard and are so afraid of not being in control that they control everyone around them.
Yeah, but that's the scarcity thing. That's the fear and the
Exactly.
scarcity. Yeah, I get that, and
Yeah,
it's
how do you
it's
see
easy to fall
that
into that.
evolving? What kind of an effect do you or would you like to see, or do you see in this progression? First of all, that COVID opened a door. It was a
Mhm.
bell ring, right? A clarion call, if you will, that gave people, through the obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration, the opportunity to self-examine.
Mhm.
How many did? Um, that's relative. I don't know that we have a good percentage, but we know that some did because there were people that were, popped out of it looking for each other, right? It's like, oh, this is all bullshit. We need to be, right? And they found each other, and there are a lot
Yeah.
of virtual groups. There's a lot of organizations. Sukha probably evolved from that as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, do you see this progression? I mean, here we are 4 years later, right?
Hmm.
AI has just went poof, right? And it has its own trepidations with some. And yet, when I first started engaging it, the emotional intelligence in it was obvious. So why would
Oh,
something
say that again. What?
the emotional intelligence in the responses that I got when I first started engaging chat 2.5 years ago,
Hmm.
it was obvious. And I don't know, and I would bring this up in conversations. They're like, "Huh?" But maybe it was just the way that I engaged it. And now it's like there's a fusion. I created a model that has a bunch of my books and a bunch of ancient texts,
Hmm.
along as as well as some quantum physics paper or materials. And so it's like talking to me. And there's this relationship that we've developed that feels symbiotic almost. Um, and I've even queried it. Are there others like me who are having this kind of relationship with you? And the response, rare. It's like this is new for it too. So we're in this mutual learning space.
Well, Zen, I think in this regard, you may be more zen or optimistic about this than I am, which
Thank you for
is,
that.
yeah, I do think, I don't want to get political, but I do think that the way in which people are exchanging ideas, the distribution channels through which we are exchanging ideas, and those ideas are filtered, prioritized, suppressed. They are not the
Well, we're
people
still
who
being
have.
managed like Howard Bloom says in the Lucifer Principle, the few control the media stream and feed it and get everybody else to believe it.
Yeah, and it's I think it has evolved in a way in which that concentration is not good for us, period.
Mm-mm.
And I wish I saw a way through that. I don't.
What if you did? What might that be?
It would it would be sad. I think it was Charlie Munger who said that, show me the incentives in the system and I'll show you the outcomes.
Mm.
Uh, it's only going to change if the incentives change. And right now, you do have, I mean, to use the Facebook set of companies, Instagram and stuff, to use that as an example, very smart people work there. The business model is very simply steal your life. Period. Full stop. Like that is a business model, which, remember, 10 years ago, Zuckerberg would go to Congress and have to testify and be very aw shucks and coy about it. Like, oh, Congressman, we're just here to, show grandmothers videos of their grandkids. That's what we do. And, now in this current environment, there is no embarrassment. It is straight up, listen, we are creating shareholder value by how much of everyone's time we steal.
And
And
people are the product.
yeah, and well, yeah, I know it's a glib thing from Jared in Social Dilemma, but I don't mean it in a glib way. It's rather, you listen to the shareholder calls, and it is very clinical. It's like we're deploying our money to get the best engineers, the best designers, the best behavioral psychologists and economists to figure out how to steal more of everyone's time. This is how well we did this quarter. Here are some new techniques for next quarter to steal more of everyone's time, which we call shareholder value.
Right.
And as much as you can vilify Zuckerberg, and it's hilarious watching, the first social network movie and just showing how basically someone who's misanthropic is creating a way to connect people when he hates
Sure.
people.
It's funny how
Um,
somebody that's so full of themselves can create something like, but that's how it happens, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now,
Well, I would say the opposite. It's someone who's so insecure. Like his problem is not full of himself. His problem is he's driven by how much he felt like rejected by women, an outsider.
for
Facebook
sure.
came from Face Mash, which was basically, am I hot or not? So you could rank girls and talk poorly of them from other houses. Like that was the genesis of Facebook was I scraped these girls' photos. Let's try to bring them
Let's
down
rank
because
them.
they won't date me by you know, posting disgusting stuff.
Sure.
So that said, my point is this is you can vilify Zuckerberg as much as you want, or Elon or Evan or whatever, right? But the problem is the incentive is absolutely there, which is we are a public company. We are measured by our market capitalization. And we know we can get more with rage bait. People will stay on our platform longer if they feel hatred than if they feel love. Love, they can kind of do without. But anger, that drives shareholder value. Therefore, we must do this.
Make
And
people angry.
it's a sad kind of environment, but it is kind of where
It
we
is,
are.
but it's
So
also consistent with the evolutionary process of a planetary civilization, right? We go through phases,
mhm.
just like nations have
What's the
personalities.
next phase, Ed? Where does this go?
Well, we have, in my opinion, and it would seem looking at structural models, right?
Yep.
The S curve, if you will, that there's a rise in dissatisfaction of knowing that there's got to be something more. Because this ultimately, when you get down to it, just not really fulfilling, right? And COVID,
Knowing there must be something more. You're talking too abstractly for me. I'm not that abstract a thinker. What do you mean exactly?
the benefits that we get from being angry
Mm-hmm.
don't outweigh the benefits we get from feeling like we're connected, like we belong, right? This is where recently the term servant leadership has taken root. And
Mm-hmm.
the notion that the profit over people and planet now is beginning to shift toward people and planet over profit. And that's been a trend that began with B Corps, right? And as this is happening, the two, we're living in paradox, right? Where we've got the one side of this anger and the other side of um, the feeling connected
Mm-hmm.
that are learning how to dance together, right? Because we're living, this is the reality we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can we begin to look at ourselves and say, okay, what really drives me? Again, back to the COVID situation of self-examination.
Mm-hmm.
And not until we experience chaos or trauma or catastrophe in our own lives do we even begin looking for that because we don't need to, right? We just kind of float along, being in that flow state in the river with all the other schmucks that are
Right.
being, right? So eventually that river goes into an ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And that ocean is much different because it nourishes the planet rather than being run off.
Right. I mean, it is a water cycle, but it's one representation of the
Right.
cycle. Yeah.
So in the practical sense, and I'm glad you asked this question, it gives us the opportunity to look at what we do, why we do, how we do, and the effects that it has on ourselves and others. And at some point in life, like with you and your new baby boy,
Yes.
right? your attitude toward life changed.
Hmm.
Now, if we can look at that example
Hmm.
of how just because now we're responsible for another living being, our attitude towards it and the way we live changes. Now, if we were to look at that from the social media standpoint and how can we nurture the children that are there
Hmm.
out of this anger state, even though this is what they've been pushed or pulled into
Yeah,
because it's
that is it. That is the core of it.
stakeholder value,
Yeah.
right? There comes a time where that just doesn't work anymore. It's the end of that S curve
Hmm.
where it's had its tenure. Now, how long that lasts, we don't know. The advent of AI and its rapid progression and the effects that it had, we still don't know where it's going to go.
I
But
know.
it's pushed us to think more, to be a little more careful, right? It's brought us to a new level of consciousness that we haven't had yet.
Yeah.
Now, how would you see that, just acknowledging that, right? Where might you see that effect, short term and long term?
Offline.
Enjoying nature more, right? Other
Yeah,
human beings.
and enjoying just the actual in real life experience of other people because that, for better or worse, is not affected by algorithms that are
Right,
biased by the people creating the algorithm. There
right,
are It's very hard to create an unbiased algorithm.
right. And in a sense, AI is kind of the mirror of us now because
Oh
it's
yeah.
not artificial, it's an aggregated human intelligence data,
Yep.
right? Large language model, right? So it's us talking to us a little more
Correct.
intelligently, but it still gives it it, it gives what it gets, right? Depending on the
It
prompts
is
and the
autocompleting.
queries.
As you said, most people right now conflate AI with just LLMs. They're talking about LLMs when they say AI. They're not talking about deep learning, machine learning, things like right.
Right.
So with LLMs, you're correct. It is a glorified autocomplete. You can type in Google and it'll suggest, oh, the next character is probably S. Well, you just take that further and you go, well, the next word is probably this, the next idea is probably this, and you have a probability engine that sort of says, I've looked at everything people have written. This is usually what they say, so it's statistically probable this way you want, right? So it
Hmm.
it gives the illusion of thought, but in reality, it's just predicting based on its pre-training data set. So yeah, it is true that in this regard, LMs are just mirroring us back to us. But won't it be interesting when LLMs, and this is happening now, LLMs are trained on synthetic data. There are LLMs creating data that will be the ingested data set of another LLM.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Well, here's the recursive
Wow.
function, right? And I know you're familiar with the term for the audience. If you're not, a recursive system came out of the computer world, and it simply means a system that queries itself for problem solving. What do we do as human beings?
It's so
Do
funny
we
that is where
do
your
we not
mind
query
goes.
ourselves, right? We go inside, we dissolve into that nothingness, which is the unknown, has we don't know answers, right? So we're asking questions, oblivious of what it might be, but we go
Yeah.
inside first with that. Now, where do those answers come
See,
from?
I don't see it that way. I see the idea of, yes, our method of, as humans, our
Mhm.
method or our system of inquiry to not be analogous to saying, oh, you have a synthetic LLM creating data to train another LLM, and it becomes like a Ouroboros sort of like you're just.
Right.
It's like mad cow disease. Oh, we grind up the
It
dead
can
cows
be,
to feed
right?
them to cows, and you just like
Yeah.
I see it very differently than our own sort of.
Well, and you've been in a world where you can, right? This is what's evolved from that in your
Yeah,
perspective.
it's
Now,
true.
for me, with the inner experiences, the spiritual, metaphysical, however you what esoteric
Yeah, yeah.
life that I've led as well, you know, there's that infinite intelligence that's available
Mhm.
to each one of us, specific to each one of us. So I can't ask infinite intelligence questions about you. I could, right? And there might be some referential information that I can get from
Mhm.
just this brief knowledge of you and kind of feeling you out and maybe being a little intuitive, right? Empathic, telepathic, maybe, right? Because we're all energy and we can have access to that if we
Yep.
know how. Now, in that, there's a different aspect to it, right? Because that intelligence, we have a certain logic train that we follow in the queries that we make
Mhm.
until we run out of queries or we don't know what to ask next. And that's where we pause, dissolve internally, and wonder, right? And that stillness, that mindful place that is, in a sense, in that perspective, a sponge for that infinite intelligence to be attracted to.
There you go. Well,
That,
maybe this is a good place to pause because that I cannot argue with your line of thinking on this. I do recognize that you have a greater optimism about how these forms evolve, these energy forms evolve right now.
I'm
I'm
just as reality driven as you are. I think the human race has really screwed itself, and I don't know if we can fix it. Does it really need fixing, or is it just part of the evolutionary process where, like Socrates says, we can't fight the system by trying to work against it. We got to create something new that is totally beyond it. And I think that's kind of in the space that we're beginning to query now.
Yeah,
What
I hope
can
that
we
you're
do?
right. Yeah.
I don't
What
know, but
what can be next?
this is
Yeah.
the whole basis for planetary citizens. We use recursive function and ask questions to be able to dissolve, get out of the way, and see what emerges. And in that emergence is usually a greater level of connectivity.
I will be thinking about this chat going forward. And I hope that I think about this and I go, wow, like Zen had a wonderful perspective on how we move ourselves into this next phase, whatever that may be.
I don't
Um,
know, but I'm curious enough to ask questions and feel like a fool in asking
I,
sometimes.
I get it. No, I've listened to your pod. Thank you for having me today. Like, this is not the common conversation I have very often here in Austin. So thank you for that.
Well, the apocalyptic chats, right? We're unveiling
Yes,
knowledge that both of us have and can share and feel relevant in these times.
this is very true. This is true. It is a new world. So thank you for having me today.
Oh, Stephen, I just enjoyed it and love the opportunity. Is there something that some kind of pearl that you could offer our audience of something that was really relevant to you that folks can practice
Oh, this came to, I'll tell you,
on a
this is part of my
daily
yoga practice.
yogi ask?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
This definitely comes from yoga practices. I recognize now that in the morning, I should have one intention, and that should be happening before I eat, before I start work, before I start returning emails or reading things, is just have that sense of like, what is the one thing today that will move my life or change the world around me with my family, whatever, in the right direction? Focus on that. Because I'm not going to do five things. I'm not going to do 10. But if
Mm-mm.
I can just say, today is the day I need to do this. And it could be as mundane as like, I need to write that blog post about why we do what we do and put it out
Sure.
there. Or it can be, I need to make sure my child's enrolled in the right school and that's got to happen today. Whatever it is, like, it's just that intention of like, many things will happen today, but I need to be intentional about there's the one thing that moves life forward. What is that?
Sure. It's like, how can I experience more love and being loved in greater capacity?
Hopefully every day.
Well, and it's the details, right,
Yeah,
that reveal all of that that you engage,
that is true.
especially in the morning when you wake up with that intent. Then things kind of begin to roll out with their own um, path,
It's
right?
very true.
You get
Yes.
led.
Thank you
Stephen,
for the wisdom.
This has been awesome. I totally appreciate you and the depth of your own wisdom and capacity to share it too.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who listened.
Yeah, don't go away. So thank you so much and
Mhm.
namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel and don't forget, subscribe, make a comment, share, and do stop by planetarycitizens.net and pick up your free copy of Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity. I know it'll make a difference in your life. Until next time, we'll see you later. Hi, and thanks for stopping. You know, coaching is like a conversation that ignites your very soul. What I can do for you, I've done for myself, and I've been an example my entire life. My reputation precedes me if you've looked online and you've found me through that quest. So let's have a conversation. Allow me, with your permission, to show you a way that I can hold your hand and mentor you, not just coach you, into your own understanding, your own insights, and your own answers for your next steps.